Yeah, so we are back to our regularly scheduled content, which is our Spectrum Pulse, which is where we keep our fingers on the pulse of the community. Not necessarily Spectrum, but that's just sort of our clever play on words for it. And we just keep an eye out for things that are topics of conversation, things that people might be curious about or confused about, and we try and do a bit of a deep dive on them in order to get as much good information as possible, and then present it to you in a way that's objective, and then give a lot of times our subjective interpretation or what our thoughts are afterwards. So this week's Spectrum Pulse is since we decided to go on this one because the roadmap roundups for June included the expansion of the progress tracker into Q1 2023 with the addition of work and the additional work scheduled for downstream teams. And there's been a lot of stuff that was added to the progress tracker, both things that were very public on the roadmap roundup, and then a lot of things that aren't, that if you don't keep track of it in detail like Naz and I do religiously, we have our own little cult. It's a lot of fun. But if you don't keep track of it religiously, you miss out on those details. And so I'm sure Naz has seen it as well, but there's been a lot of confusion about things getting added, things getting removed. Why are they doing these things? What does this mean? And so we decided to come up with some hints, tips, tricks, resources that we could share with you guys in order to make understanding the progress tracker and the roadmap a little bit easier, so that way you can set your own expectations more appropriately, and just have a better understanding when you go and look at it, because it is a bit intimidating. There's a lot of information.
Yeah, I've seen people specifically say they don't understand how to read the roadmap. So that's kind of where this kind of stems from, is we want to give you guys the ability to see the information yourself without needing, let's say, us to tell you what's there. That way you can fact check us. We're not just telling you what's up.
And it makes it a lot easier for conversations to be had with less confusion.
Just being able to send somebody the link to the roadmap and say, hey, this is tile, because we can send links for specific deliverables on the roadmap now. So this is the thing we're talking about. We can just send that, or you can talk about that. And being able to actually know what that tile means is important.
This tile and the things on it actually indicate.
Yeah. And the one thing that we still are missing on the roadmap, the what else is needed for that. So.
And then after the Spectrum Pulse, we'll go into our scanner anomalies, which is where us being the Pathfinders, we're charting a course through the nebulous information, and sometimes we're looking at scans and radars, and things come back a little bit fuzzy, and we decide to focus scans on that to get more information. And that's where Nazeris and I pick things that we're whether it's something we're curious about, confused about, something that we saw and we found interesting, and we do a little bit a similar deep dive on that. And so Naz will have his, which is going to be on dynamic events, and mine is on the March of the Van Duel across, and it'll be a guided tour using the Arc star map via Nazeris' screen. So let's launch right into the Spectrum Pulse, and we called it, the working title is Making Progress with the Progress Tracker. And so we just came up with some tips, and we got things on screen or in our notes. And Naz, if something comes up on your head, from your head off the cuff, go ahead and throw it out there too. This is just what we could come up with, in a relatively short period. But the first thing with the progress tracker is the progress tracker shows 4 quarters of development. And I know this is a thing that bothers some people, because they'll say, oh, you said you're going to show us a year of work and you only show us 3/4 of the time. And it's like, well, weasel words. The Q1 gets added. For example, during May and June, work for Q1 2023 was added. So when that was added, it showed work in Q1 2023 as well as Q2 2022. And so it shows 4 quarters. And just because Q1 doesn't get added as soon as you get into Q2 doesn't mean they're not showing a year's worth of work. It's just it goes from the end, the beginning here to the end here in the next year. And so technically it is 4 quarters, but the updates, when they add the latest quarter, the 4th quarter, that usually doesn't come until like the end of the 2nd month in the current quarter at the earliest. Sometimes the 3rd month. So like for example, with this quarter, Q2 2022, April, May, June, they didn't add in work for Q1 2023 until May, right? Yeah, it wasn't until late May that they added some, and then the rest of the downstream work got added piecemeal towards the end of May and through June with the roadmap updates. And so a lot of times people will see sprints for deliverables, and they see that bar going out to the end of the progress tracker. The current end is Q1 2023, the end of March, and they see that and they're like, oh, that means it'll be done then. No, that does not mean that that's when it's going to be done. That just means that is the end of the progress tracker. That sprint could end then. It probably won't end then. It'll probably continue when they add in the next quarter. But people see that, and then when they add in the next quarter, they're like, oh, great, they added more work. It's delayed. It was never delayed. It wasn't scheduled to be done at that point in the first place.
And I think that's the first good rule of thumb. If something goes to the end of the scheduled,
that's why we made it number 1.
Yeah. If it goes to the end of the scheduled roadmap, it is not the end of the progress on that tile. That tile will most likely get extended. It's just the current scheduled work.
It end within the scope of the progress tracker, you won't know whether that sprint is ending or not. And it's just a sprint. It doesn't, even when that sprint ends, you don't know if that is the culmination of the work or if they have gotten this far and then they need to come back to it later.
Yep.
Yeah. So that is numero uno when it comes to setting expectations. There's a lot of big ticket items that were added in May, June that people got all excited about. And they're like, oh, we're going to see this in Q1 2023. And,
like for example, we've had server meshing hit the end of the roadmap for the entire year. We still don't have it because server meshing is not the server meshing that we're getting, hopefully by the end of this year, early next year. It is the dynamic server meshing is when that will actually conclude on the roadmap. So that will not end for probably the next year to 2 years on the roadmap. Yeah. It'll continue every update to be pushed to the wall of the update.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, those big ticket items that are going to be worked on and iterated for a long time will just the main deliverable for it will continue to get added, or the end will just continue as the roadmap continues. Moving on to the next point, there are with the progress tracker, you have the 2 sides. You've got the teams and the deliverables. And if you look at the teams side, you see a whole lot of teams are listed in alphabetical order. But there are 2 different types of teams within the development, 2 different types of development teams within CIG. There's upstream and there's downstream. And the downstream teams, they take their queues and develop their schedules based on what the upstream teams are working on. And so the Jake Acapella created who is one of his responsibilities. It is not the only thing that he does at CIG. He will be quick to remind you on that. We love Jake. All hail Jake. But Jake Acapella, who manages the roadmap and progress tracker and all that as part of his duties as a community manager, made also the public roadmap companion source document, which we will link in the show notes. and you can Google it and it comes right up. But that is what will tell you within that document what teams are upstream and what teams are downstream. And so it's important to take that into account and look at what teams are working on what. Actually click on the deliverable and open it up and see what team is working within that deliverable or is working on that item in order to get an idea of the scope of the work that is actually occurring. Because if you just look at the team's view, you only see the work that that team is doing on that deliverable. And it's very if people don't go back and forth and look at this is here's the deliverable with all the teams listed, or here's the team working on that deliverable, it can get confusing.
Yeah.
And so people will think, oh, it's getting done at this time because the team that's working on it is done with it at that point. It's like, no, if you look at the deliverable, there's 4 other teams working on it. And their work is scheduled all the way out to here. So we know that it won't be, there's no way it could be finished prior to this point.
For example, a ship will first show up on the concept art, our vehicle concept art team. If you just look at the vehicle concept art team, yes, their work will be done at X date, but then the vehicle content team needs to be done for it. Still, it's not going to be done when the vehicle content team's done, because, as we'll get to later, the downstream people need to do their work, and their work's scheduled not as far out as the upstreams. And so, at the very end of the project, within the last quarter of the ship that we are theoretically making up, is going to get done for the vehicle content, all the downstream teams need to be added. So sound, VFX, animation, and even within those, you could have like part-time or full-time work on it. There's a lot of little nuances to going between the team's deliverables and those members of the
let's see. And yeah, so go back and reference the roadmap companion in order to keep track of what's getting worked on by who, in order to get a better idea of what's going on. Moving on to point number 3, and this goes along with the first 2. The upstream teams are the ones that are scheduled up to a year out. So all the teams that are upstream, they can have their work planned up to a year out. They're the ones that take on the whole of a project, the whole of a deliverable that's going to be taking a long time, and they'll be working on it for a long period, all the way out to the end of the progress tracker sometimes, and beyond. And so when the roadmap gets updated to add in the next quarter, you're only seeing the upstream teams getting changed for that 4th quarter that's shown on the progress tracker. You generally, it's not always, but for the most part, you won't see downstream teams getting scheduled that far out. And so that's the other caveat. If you see a sprint ending at the end of the progress tracker, that does not denote the end of that work. But further, if you see an upstream team's work ending, that does not mean that is the end of the work for that deliverable. Like you said, there's upstream and downstream teams, and sometimes, and people get upset about it, but these things are not fixed. Development, the CIG uses agile development, and as much as some people malign it, it's a good process and it works. But frequently, people will see a deliverable get added, and they'll see the upstream team is going to be working on it out to this point, and then they'll come back and check on it in like a quarter or 2, and they'll see that point has changed. And so they'll get all upset. Oh, it's delayed. Oh, they can't keep deadlines or anything like that. It's like, no, this is, they scheduled that, and they're like, okay, we think that this work for this team, for this deliverable, will take this long. And then a month into that work, they are able to reevaluate the scope of the work and be like, you know what, this is going well, but we ran into this and that, and we need to add more people or add more work to it based off of what was um, initially planned. The roadmap used to show this based off of tasks.
Yeah.
You had numbered tasks. And so people would just lose their minds because it would start off with this many numbered tasks when a deliverable was first added onto the roadmap. And you'd see every time they do an update, you'd see tasks get completed, tasks get completed, and a lot of times tasks would get completed, but then more would get added. That's just the way it goes. As you complete a task, that they're building all these tools, they're building all these assets, and so as you're building it, you run into things that you couldn't. There's no way you could anticipate it.
Yeah.
That's just how it works with a new IP.
A good example of almost that exact thing is the item cache.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the item cache, I don't think we had the roadmap when this actually started becoming a thing. But the item cache was
the progress tracker now.
Yeah, okay. It was supposed to be the thing that gave us the ability to turn on server meshing and full persistence. As they developed it and as they worked on it, they figured out that wasn't going to work. So if that was on the roadmap of the progress tracker, we would have seen more and more tasks added, and then it be completely abandoned, and the bar itself that would have been there would have been gone and passed until months later, possibly even quarters later, after they went back to the drawing board and came back with the new replication layer and entity grid system. And so that we do have things on the roadmap, and it's only very soon in the future will those things actually start getting into game, and they're still adding new tasks because there's new things for this new kind of tech that they're building that will need to be added. So sometimes in game development or software development at large, when you start something, you don't know the entire extent of what you're going to need for it. And then that thing that you're working on may be inferior to what you actually need it to do. And so you have to go back to the drawing board to find out what will work for it. So that's why some things kind of slip around.
And that is project management 101.
Yay!
It's a very, and the more complex the project is, the more likely these things are going to occur, and it's just the way of the world. And sorry, backers, you need to get used to it. You need to understand that this is how it goes. If you've never undertaken a project where during the course of that project things changed, you learn new things, the plan changed, and you had to adjust at some point. I don't know. I don't know what to tell you. That is life. That is adulthood. And it is no different in game development. It is probably far worse in software development, just because there's so many unknowns, and especially in a project like SC. But it gets better over time, because the closer you get to finishing something, the closer you get to the end, the clearer the end becomes. And that's why as you get closer to the end of things, a lot of times things will get delayed a little bit here and there, but it's not generally not big huge issues. The only issue is sometimes CIG isn't great about communicating that, but they have gotten better,
and they're a lot better than most.
Yeah at least they make the attempt. They try. At least give them credit for trying. It isn't easy. But yeah, that is it for point number 3. Point number 4: downstream teams are only scheduled 1 quarter out at a time.
3 months.
3 months, and so they only get their schedules get updated at the beginning of the new quarter. So we just started the quarter 3. We are now at the beginning of quarter 3.
Ooh.
And the first roadmap update will be tomorrow, Wednesday, the 6th of July. And so tomorrow, and likely tomorrow, as well as the following roadmap update on the 20th. Yeah, the 20th it should be, is when we will see the additions, updates, changes to the schedules for the downstream teams. And Jake is usually really good about putting out the important stuff, additions, changes, that sort of thing. The really most notable things. He doesn't put all the details in the roadmap roundup. He puts this was added, this was removed. But he doesn't put, this was elongated, this was shortened, this had these people added to it, that sort of thing. But those downstream teams should start to get updated next week. And so you run into tomorrow. You run into that same problem. People see things that the downstream teams are working on, and they see the work ending at the end of the current quarter for the downstream team. I'm like, oh, it must be done. It'll be done. It'll be done at the end of June. So we'll see it in 3.17 too. No, that is not the case. You don't, just like with the upstream teams, you can't really get any indication of when that scheduled work for that sprint will be completed until you can see the end of it and until you are approaching the end of it.
Yeah, good example of that one is the tile for every single team, including upstream and downstream, is a tile that's called bug fixing and tech debt. Currently, every team that has that tile go to the extent of their known schedule. They are not going to be done with that tile at the point where that bar ends. So the actor tech team is one of those downstream teams. They're only scheduled for bug fixing and tech debt up to tomorrow, basically. There's more bugs and there's more tech that they need to work on. So when we get the update, that bar will get extended.
And these are all things that you can use to manage your hype appropriately. So that way, you see these things ending, and you're like, oh, it'll be done. Wait, no. Tree and Nazeris said that that's the end of when their scheduled work will be for that quarter. So once we get to the end of that quarter and we get the update, then I'll have a better idea of how much work is needed. Like for me, and probably for a lot of people, the something we're all looking forward to is the new star map. And the UI teams are working on the new star map. The UI teams are downstream teams. And so we have, other than what we can see on the progress tracker, we know they're working on it. We know they've been working on it for the star map and what's the other? Is it
Radar?
Yeah, it's the what do they call the deliverable? But it's the thing to do with radar.
The FPS radar and scanning.
Yeah, I think it's that one, as well as the Mobiglass update. I think are all on there right now.
Yep, and AR map marker.
There are like 3 or 4 huge items being worked on by the UI team that Nazeris I, like every time we read the monthly reports, Nazeris and I scroll down the UI and we're like, where are they? How long are they? How much more time? When CIG? Because they're huge quality of life things that will just it should make things so much better when we're playing the game. But we have no idea how much longer the work is going to take beyond the end of the current quarter. And so, like I'm waiting with bated breath for the update tomorrow to see if we're going to get an update on the UI teams. That's going to be the first thing that I look at tomorrow is, did the UI teams get updated? And if they did, what's the status of their work? Because it's so important. But yeah, that's probably my favorite example when it comes to downstream teams.
It's the Squadron 42 UI team.
Yeah, they combined it and renamed them. But yeah, they've got a bunch of really important deliverables that are really important for Squadron 42. And every backer who plays Star Citizen should be excited, super excited for what they're working on, especially because Jake himself has said that he has seen it and used it internally and is very enthused. So we shall see. But I'll come back to that towards the end when we get to one of our points. But yeah, that's the downstream teams, only scheduled 1 quarter at a time. And they get their schedules updated and changed at the beginning of the new quarter. So keep that in mind. Moving on to point number 5. Many, if not most, deliverables require work from both upstream and downstream teams. This is really apparent for big ticket items like ships, events, locations, gameplay mechanics. So if you go look at these, all the big things that you see on the actual roadmap, the release view, if you click on any one of those deliverables on the progress tracker, almost all of them you will see multiple teams assigned to them during the course of their development. Those are the big ticket items that they include on the roadmap release view, and those are the ones where if you're not keeping in mind points 1 through 4 when looking at those deliverables, you're gonna be disappointed. But yeah, like Nazeris, you've mentioned ships, and ships are just like the really good example, especially when going back, because you can look at the progress tracker in retrospect, and you can see vehicles that are being worked on right now and what teams are scheduled for those vehicles, and then you can look at vehicles that were completed and released, and when they were released, and when their sprints, how their sprints correlate or corroborate their actual release. And you can see, oh, okay, the vehicle tech team worked on it out to here, the vehicle content team worked on it all the way out to here, but then it was released here, and in between that time is when, shortly before is when all the downstream teams were doing their work.
Yep.
And that way you can look at your favorite vehicle that you're super excited about, and you can see, oh sweet, they've got vehicle concept art just completed their work, which means it's out of, and maybe they'll tell you in the monthly report, and it's out of white box into gray box, and the vehicle content team is working on it for 6 months. So it must be released with this patch at the end of 6 months.
Not so.
No. As you approach the end of that scheduled work, as long as it's within the end of the progress tracker, as you approach that is when you get into that quarter is usually when you will see the downstream teams added, either the quarter before when the content team is supposed to be scheduled to finish it, or that actual quarter itself. Usually there's like overlap. Vehicle content team is scheduled to finish here. As you get closer, this is middle of this quarter, like the Corsair right now, right? Corsair, the content team is due to be finished, I think, in September or August. No, I want to say it's mid-August. And so everybody's like, oh, it'll be ready for 318. It'll be released in 318. It could.
It could.
Or the downstream teams could get added, and the downstream work could go all the way out into November. Is it likely? I don't think so, but those sort of things happen. And that's why you cannot predict a release date based off of a team's completion of their work. You can't really even sort of estimate until you can see the end of all of the teams that are involved in the work for that deliverable. And you usually can't see the end for that until you are actually within the quarter, that you're within that quarter for when CIG has that scheduled work to be finished. Just like I said, the end gets clearer the closer you get. And so, we are coming in the beginning of July, and, over the next 2 roadmap updates starting tomorrow, we'll get our downstream teams added. And so we should see downstream work scheduled for the Corsair. And lo and behold, we'll be able to get a good idea of when the Corsair should be finished. But you don't know until you get, literally get to within, 3 months, of yes or no. And so that's the best way to temper your expectations and keep an eye on things, to say, don't make predictions a year out. You can look and you'd be like, oh, well, sweet, they're working on this. and the work is, the upstream team's work is scheduled to go out 6 months or something like that, 7 months, but it's going to be the upstream team's work is scheduled to be done before the end of the 4-quarter progress tracker. That's a good indication. Sweet, you might see your favorite ship or your gameplay mechanic within the next year because they're already working on it and stuff. But whether it's going to be in this quarter patch or next quarter patch, you won't know or you won't have a good idea until you get to within that quarter. And it is the way it is. And getting upset about it, if the work gets extended as you get closer, is just setting yourself up for failure and disappointment. And that is entirely because you don't understand how to interpret the progress tracker. And it's not meant to be mean or anything. It's like, this is the way the information is portrayed. There are limitations to the way that it is portrayed. Jake does his absolute best. There's a lot of things that Jake wants to have added, but the Turbulent Web team only has so many resources, and they do have plans to add more things. But this is the information that we have, and if you're able to understand the way it's portrayed, you can not set yourself up for disappointment.
Yeah, and also the progress tracker is not a set in stone. CIG will have this done by this date, as we've said. It is the prediction of each producer in each team of the entire company that is Cloud Imperium Games. So it is already predictions twice removed. So if you try to make a prediction on top of that, you're now prediction squared. And the shaky ground, or prediction cubed it would be, the shaky ground that you stand on trying to make predictions on the roadmap is very, you might as well be standing on aerated sand. It's very open to interpretation, and there's a lot of things between a downstream team or an upstream team needing more work, a downstream team lingering on some work so they couldn't get that other thing for the downstream part, or deprioritization or reprioritization, or even something getting done faster than thought, or something coming up that nobody expected. So making predictions on top of these predictions of predictions is this is what one part of this kind of segment is supposed to be. Hey, this is how to read the information. Another one is this is how to understand how vague the information, and that's not a CIG specific thing. The roadmaps that a lot of games have are pretty solid prediction, is what every roadmap is. A lot of games, there are some pretty famous ones out there that put out roadmaps and then miss every single thing on them. There are some games that don't make roadmaps, and their roadmap ends up becoming a bi-weekly or monthly or quarterly just update on where they are, instead of with I've seen one that was multiplayer as a feature, and they'll just update it with how big percentage they're currently at. It's not a prediction map, it's a reactive map to where the work is. So just know that this map is, or the progress track on the roadmaps that we have for Star Citizen are very much predictions of where they hope to be, not where they know they will be, because they don't know. Nobody knows in software development anything.
Pardon me.
Perfect timing.
Yeah. No, and yeah, it's that's why they have meetings. In order, like you said, the producer has a meeting with the people in their team in order to try and break down. Okay, this is what we need to get done based off of previous experience. How long do we think this is going to take? What needs to get done and how long is it going to take? And then, later on, whether it's weeks or months later, they have another meeting to see, okay, how is this work progressing? And what have we learned? What do we need to change? What else do we need to do? What resources do we need? How do we need to adjust the plan? And every time these meetings occur, they report to Jake. Jake gets fed this information via their internal Jira, and he updates us, on a bi-weekly basis, based off of the schedules that these teams are on. And the teams are on different schedules, and the teams being on different schedules actually creates bugs in the progress tracker, which is a
It's
scanner anomaly I did a while back. I know,
It's
right?
just so funny. There are bugs, and it's just so good. That's how amazing this roadmap is. This roadmap is so complex. It has bugs in it. Not a static image like most companies do.
When did I do that scanner anomaly?
That one was a while ago. I feel like.
Was that episode 1?
No.
I need to check in with Jake to see if they ever got that addressed and see if there are items that are still falling off and coming back on.
Gosh.
Item number 6, yeah, we did 5. Item number 6, and this ties into 5, but I thought it was worth reiterating.
It was episode 2.
The people. Oh man.
It's your scanner now on episode 2.
But item number 6, and this is the thing that people always get confused, especially newer folks, is if a vehicle is only being worked on by VCA, vehicle concept art, it is not guaranteed to be in production.
Here's a good demonstration of this one. The Argo flying saucer. The Argo flying saucer, not an official name, was a vehicle that was concepted. It was white boxed. And after that, they're like, no, completely scrapped.
Yep.
So they can get all the way through. Yeah. They can get all the way through vehicle concept, and then go, no, we're gonna take this in a completely different direction, send it back to the beginning of the pipeline, and redo it. So very early teams like that, doesn't mean it's gonna be there.
Yeah. And vehicle concept art is a upstream team. The downstream teams, take their cues off of them, but it's usually a vehicle goes from vehicle concept art to vehicle content, and then within the work of vehicle content is usually the downstream work from vehicle tech, VFX, narrative, audio, and
UI animation.
Yeah, those sorts of things, based off of need. But I can't tell you how many times people got upset because they thought that their ship was going to be released because they saw it on the progress tracker and they didn't even click to open the deliverable to see which team was working on it, or they're like, oh my gosh, it's only going to take 12 weeks to finish that. That's great. And it's like, no, that's just 12 weeks of work from vehicle concept art. That's just the concept artists, the people who draw the 2D images, and the people who make the base white box in-engine rendering for in order to establish metrics.
It's the pretty pictures.
It's the pretty pictures in white box is what concept art entails now. And so people get upset about it, and it's like, you have to read the thing. It tells you that it's just vehicle concept art working on it, no one else. Don't get upset. People got upset when on this recently, when the whole D and E and B were removed from the progress tracker, and it's like, they removed from the progress tracker. I'm not getting my ship this year. I literally saw that, and from people making comments, in different places, and it's like, you weren't getting it this year in the first place. That was just a concept artist going back and updating the concept art or working on the white box in order to try and get it more ready, so that way when the vehicle production teams are ready to work on it, that it's ready for them to go.
I imagine that happened with the Odyssey too, because the Odyssey finished up Q4 last year in concept.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, so it's you have to look at what actual teams are working on something, and keep track of that. But that, I put that as 0.6. because a lot of times a vehicle will start with vehicle concept art, and you'll see, oh, okay, well, it's just vehicle concept. But if you keep track of the deliverable, as the concept work goes on, a lot of times it will continue straight into production, and you'll see the vehicle content teams work get added in, and then the downstream teams get added in. And you can see that if you've been following the progress tracker for the Banu Merchantman, it was in concept art up until just recently. It was in concept art for almost a year.
It's a big boat.
Yeah, and so it just came out of concept art when they were doing the white boxing that Jared showed us on ISC a couple months ago.
Yeah,
that was still concept art, and so it just went into production after leaving white box and going into gray box. But you can see that on the progress tracker right now. You can see, oh, okay, concept art's work overlapped with vehicle content while they were doing the white box into gray box transition, and now it's in full production. But at the time, the 6 months ago, it was still just concept art. It wasn't in production. We didn't know. We were hoping, and they're saying that they wanted it to go into production, but there's no way of knowing because the work wasn't scheduled. Those teams weren't committed. That happened with the Polaris. The Polaris is on the progress tracker. They did the concept rework of the Polaris. They've given us information about that. It is ready to go into production. As soon as the teams are available and it gets prioritized, it is ready to go. White box done, all up to metric and everything. But it didn't go into production, and so no one was scheduled for the work beyond the vehicle concept artists, because it concept art and then end, no mas.
And as a quick aside on that, there was an idea there, and it keeps leaving my head. No, it jumped out of my head just now.
Mm-hmm. Hold that thought.
Yeah.
Interrupt me if you get it. But this ties into point number 7. If you do look at the progress tracker, and you do look at the teams that are working on things, and if you click on the team, a team's scheduled work on the progress tracker, you can see like a vehicle content team. You click on the vehicle content team that's working on the BMM, and you can go to that. It'll take you to the vehicle content team, and it'll show you their work on the BMM. And if you open it up, you can see how many artists, how many designers, whatever, are working on it. And it's a bit of a misnomer, but this is the only way that the information can be presented, and it is frustrating to Jake because he and I have talked about it, and I get it, and it's just a limitation of the way that the progress tracker is designed. But the number of devs allocated to a sprint is not an accurate representation of the work. All that does is show you what devs of how many and of what type are currently scheduled to work on that sprint at some point during that sprint. So I forget how many are scheduled for the BMM, but there's a whole bunch of designers and artists scheduled to work on the BMM. There's like 12 artists and 9 designers or something like that. I don't remember. It's a lot. It's a big shit. Not all of them are working on it from the start of that sprint to the end of the sprint. They're not all assigned to it all at once, for the whole entirety of that scheduled work.
Yeah, they don't say what kind of artists they are. They could be 2D artists. They could be material artists. They could be specifically hard service or soft service artists. No, tell you.
And the best example of this, because people got upset about this after they did the BMM video recently. I forget which ship content designer, ship designer said it. He's like, there's only 2 artists working on it right now. And granted, that was they pre-record those things, so it was a little bit out of date. But there's only 2 artists working on it right now because they're going through and just gray boxing it. They're basically just building the shell and the ship so that way they can have artists come and designers come in and add in all the things, that make it look the way it does and make it work the way it does.
Yeah.
But they need to build the shell first.
Yeah, and there's
And
also so
like,
many hands you can have touching one asset at one time.
Exactly. Yeah, it doesn't make any sense to have 14 people working on it when you only need 2 people to do the rough gray box part in order to get the work going. They just, they need the skeleton in the frame in order to get more people. You can't, just like with building a ship in real life. You don't bring in 3,000 people to work on the ship when you haven't even built the frame of it. Yeah, if you've ever watched you can watch videos on YouTube in actual shipyards of ships being constructed and how much more comes in. The skeletal frame is now built, and maybe you have the hull, and that's it. Okay, and now 10 times more people and resources come in because they need to fill it out with all the other things to make it actually function. It's the same thing working with making a ship in a video game, on a smaller scale. And so people got upset because they saw, wait a minute, the progress tracker says this. The progress tracker says there's like, a dozen and a half people working on it, but you said there's only 2.
Yeah.
No. I'm sorry that it doesn't tell you exactly how many people are working on it on that exact moment, but the team side for that deliverable, when it shows you how many artists and designers or whoever are working on it, they aren't working on it during that entire sprint. We don't know if 3 people are working on it at this point and 7 people are working on it at this point and 12 at this point. We don't know, and there's no way for us to know. The progress tracker can't do that, and in order to do that, that's more work, and it's just not worth it. But we do know that during that sprint, this many people are going to be working on it at some point in time, from that team of this type.
I did remember my aside. So my aside for the vehicle content team, yay, is there a lot of people get upset because, and I guess that's just the theme of this segment, is a lot of people getting upset. And my recording just crashed. Yay! Give me a moment while
Don't get mad, get glad.
Yeah, seriously. I have to go move something over so we can actually continue the recording. Where are we at here? Did it rearrange all of my files for? Why? Why did you? My library folder is just gone. Oh. Is this? It could be that one.
Hooray, technology.
Yeah. It's like all of my... For some reason, all of my files just seem to have, like, moved themselves in the hierarchy. Move over there, the brand. All right, so while that transfers, I'll do my aside. A lot of people got upset with.
Is your aside gonna get recorded or not?
Oh, that's right. I can't. Right. Hi, chat. How's it going? Oh my gosh.
The good thing is, I think this is good information, and when it gets up on YouTube, and especially when you break it into segments,
yeah,
I think it should get you some views.
It does actually play. It's not corrupt. Dang it. Are you kidding? Are you absolutely kidding? The original corrupted? Just the one that moved. Both of them. Both more corrupted.
Oh, did we lose everything?
We just lost everything.
Oh no.
And I don't know what the output to the stream is going to look like. What you want to do?
I don't know. You're the tech guy. You tell me, man.
Let me see what the last stream looked like on a playback.
If you're streaming,
yeah,
and then you download the recording, does it show like all the times that it was buffering and everything like that, or does it actually?
It looks like it goes fine. It looks like it's fine. Okay, we're just gonna assume that it goes. It looks like it actually plays back fine for some reason. I don't know how. We're just going to assume that everything goes fine. We'll cut this out in post. Okay, so at the aside, yes. Okay. Is that so a lot of people got upset that there were all these concept ships going into production all the time, and we only get like 5 ships a year or something. It's more like 10 or more ships a year. Anyway, but like we talked about at the beginning of the show, we have CIG hires these people to have them work. So they have a concept art team. And so these concept artists need to continue working, or there's no point actually paying their wages. So it takes much longer to build ships than it does to concept these ships. So we end up getting a lot more concepts per year than actual ships out the door. And that helps for one reason, because they have the ability to say, this ship will help more sooner, we'll get that one out the door. And this one we'll just keep on the back burner. Or smaller ships can fill holes.
Crucible.
And smaller ships can help fill in gaps when artists have like schedules that don't, or what's the lack of overlap called? When they have one artist works till here, but the next project's not till several weeks out, so you can drop a small bit of work right there. Yes, Crucible. Yes, Crucible and the Legionnaire and.
Well, and the Crucible is the perfect example of that. The concept artists got reprioritized from the whole D and the whole E, which have no place in the game right now and won't have any place in the game for a while, and they got put on the Crucible because the Crucible is important for Pyro, because Pyro has no infrastructure and we need a repair ship. There you go. I think the Vulcan will get added, but because it's smaller, I think it'll get added later. I think the Crucible is getting started now because it's going to take longer.
And also, they don't have the tech for drones.
Yeah. Well, I think the drone tech will get added in later as well. Well, of course, about when they add the Vulcan in, and so I think that they're going to do it so that way ship-based repair that is the inverse of hull scraping will come first with the Vulcan, and then right after or shortly after will come more complete and complex repair with the Crucible, kind of like how they're doing, they're releasing hull scraping with the Vulture, but they're also going to be having it for the Reclaimer with Q3 2018 or Q3 and 318. But they've already scheduled the work for the what is it? What's the munching? What's it called?
Ship munching. Yep.
Ship munching.
Yep.
The next step. To me, that's the equivalent. Ship munching is the equivalent of a Crucible. You have lost a wing or a significant structural element of your ship, and the Crucible will not only be able to, patch up your hull with the inverse of hull scraping repair, which the Vulcan can do with its drones, but it will also be able to replace the frame, the structure underneath, which is the inverse of the munching, which should be the inverse of the munching tech. And I think that is why that is getting worked on now, so that way they can reverse engineer that however it works for when the Crucible is ready.
Makes sense.
But I think that towards the end of this year is when they will start the work for the drones and the Vulcan, because they'll have been done with the Vulcan's ability to repair, which is just the patching with the drones. Here's spray on goo, fill the hole. Anyway, tangent.
Yes.
But yeah, tinfoil hat back down on the table. But that is tip number 7. And tip number 8, and the last one, unless Nazeris, you have any other things that came to mind. I haven't had anything come up since we've been talking.
Nope.
But tip number 8 is use multiple sources to help you correlate and corroborate the information from the progress tracker. The first one being the public roadmap companion. I have that thing bookmarked so that way I can find it easily, because I sometimes I can remember, certain teams I can remember whether they're upstream or downstream. Other ones I just forget. And so I'm constantly going back to that. And it's not just that. There's other information within the roadmap companion that is really good. There's a lot of really good explanations. Things that we've talked about over these are extrapolations and further explanation of things talked about in the companion. I have the link in the show notes, so that way if you don't want to Google it, or you just happen to read the show notes, that it's in there. But the roadmap companion is important. Use it, understand it, know it. When in doubt, check the roadmap companion for some sort of confirmation. The second tool, and this is one that I actually didn't know was actually a thing outside of the little updates that I get in some of the Discord servers that I'm in. I didn't know it was an actual website until Nazeris told me. But there's a thing called Shiny Tracker. And it is amazing. I don't know how it works. It is sorcery, wizardry, whatever you want to call it. Computer magic. But somehow it is able to track all the changes from update to update of the progress tracker and and put them out there. And Nazeris, I don't remember if you have it in your indigestion. I don't remember if you have it in your Discord, but whatever that feed is called from Shiny Tracker, but some Discord.
I don't have the Shiny Tracker one. I do have the website tracker.
Okay. Some of the Discords actually have it, and I don't know how to get it, but it is really cool because it will give you a update in Discord of telling you, not in great detail, what the changes are that weren't in the roadmap roundup. So, what work was added? Was the sprint elongated? Was this one shortened? Was this team was work added as far as another team or more people? All that stuff is tracked, and you can track it using Shiny Tracker. And so Nazeris and I use that religiously in order to keep track of the things that we are watching, like hawks. And in order to make sense of things, because a lot of times if you don't follow the development, if you don't look at the progress tracker, you're not going to know that the sprint for this deliverable was elongated. It might not, that won't usually get shown in the roadmap roundup. And then all of a sudden you're like, wait a minute, I thought this was going to be done. Okay, well, you missed. Yes, I can turn up my audio and get a little bit closer. I think this is the gain, and that does that. Yeah. Am I a little louder now, Naz?
A little bit, yeah.
Okay. Black Intellect is just in chat and told me to turn up my audio. Let me know if that is better, bud. I appreciate it. But yeah, Shiny Tracker will help you keep track of those things, So that way, if you have forgotten all the other hints, tips, tricks we just talked about, you can use Shiny Tracker in order to help keep track of those things and make sense of it. But that link is going to be in the show notes. It is just shinytracker.app, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. That's what my bookmark says.
Yep. That's it.
Shiny Tracker lists and displays detected changes on the RSI progress tracker. HTTPS : / or whatever slash that is. Shiny Tracker, all one word, .app. So yeah, it is a phenomenal tool. It just takes a little bit of using to understand.
Yep.
Naz, do you have anything to add on the Shiny Tracker? You've been
Um,
using it a lot longer than I have.
Not very much longer, but a little bit.
Yeah.
So it actually does two different things. It shows you the current progress, or basically a different view of what the progress tracker shows, more of a list of deliverables, but it also has a delta. The deltas have been what Tree has been most talking about. It will show you all of the changes that happened on the entire progress tracker since the last update. So that was like if a task was added, if devs were moved around, if time was added or subtracted, if the start date was moved, either forward or backwards. So that will all show up in the delta. In the other version, just the progress tracker, it'll just list it and tell you things about it, what the tile is, and when it's supposed to start and finish, and how many devs are on it, that sort of thing. So there's two different things on it, and both of them are very useful. I think the delta is a bit more useful, but both very,
I primarily use the delta too. Yeah. As an example, I'm looking at the delta right now, and from the last update on the 22nd, it looks like, of 22nd of June. And so the changes listed from between the 22nd of June and the 8th of June. We talked about how people got upset that the work was removed for the Hull B, the Orion, the Genesis Starliner, and that was just concept art. It was just concept artists. And so, like it says, the following teams have been freed up. Vehicle concept art for the Genesis Starliner. One art dev had 42 tasks. The Hull B, one art dev had 24 tasks. The RSI Orion, one art dev had 42 tasks. So we had 3 vehicle concept artists get pulled from those deliverables, and those were removed from the progress tracker. But then you can go down, deliverables updated, Anvil Crucible. Vehicle concept art was assigned, adding 92 days of work, one art dev with 14 tasks. And where's the other one? There's another. Oh, and then the 3 unannounced vehicles. We had 3 different unannounced vehicles. Each one had 2 artists from vehicle concept added. The first one with 10, second one with 10, and third one with 9 tasks. And this was actually discussed in the roadmap roundup. The ships like the Genesis Starliner, the Hull B, D and E, and the Orion were all deprioritized because they weren't going to. The gameplay for them, other than the B, wasn't going to be available in game. It wasn't ready, so there's no point in having concept artists work on updating those ships. And so they got prioritized onto ships that would be are needed and are higher priority for the game, namely the Crucible. And then there's 3 new unannounced vehicles that are going into concept art that are apparently more pertinent to the gameplay of the not too distant future. Curious. I wonder what they might be. More tinfoil hat time, but it makes sense. But that way you can track where the development resources are coming and going from.
Yep.
Yeah. and that is the shiny tracker. The last thing within the resources is the monthly reports. And I know a lot of people don't like reading the monthly reports because they are long, but they're chock full of really good information. And if you don't like reading them, guess what? Nazeris and I do, and we will summarize them for you. We literally collate them into a single document and break down the things in detail. And yeah, it might take a little bit longer than actually reading it, but we will help you make sense of it because we are reading the monthly reports while taking into consideration all these things that we just talked about on the progress tracker and the other things that we see. So it's not just reading the monthly reports verbatim, word for word. It's reading them in context with the other stuff that Nazeris and I watch like absolute, just insane hawks.
Yeah. Speaking of it, we'll be doing that next.
Yeah. But the monthly reports will help you, because the progress tracker just shows bars and types of devs assigned to those bars, and you don't know how many are working on what, but the details are in the monthly reports. And if there are important updates to work on a deliverable or a piece of tech or something like that you're interested in, and you're keeping track of it on the progress tracker, it behooves you to keep an eye out for it on the monthly report. They will tell you what's being worked on in the monthly report, and you can look at it and say, oh, okay, this ship is in pardon me, this ship is in gray box. And you can look to see, okay, the ship is in gray box as of May, and then you can look on the progress tracker and you're like, oh, okay, the vehicle content team is working on it. It's in gray box. It's about a third of the way done on the scheduled work. Cool, they're making really good progress on it. I can't wait to see more. Or the other, like we talked about, coming back to the UI, because Nazeris and I have been watching the UI work, super closely. But they, when we went over the monthly report last month, right? And they talked about how the the new star map is functioning internally. They had the base function in there, and now they're making it look pretty and adding functionality to it. And that was for the monthly report for May. I think it was either May or April. Yeah, I think it was May. And so you can look at the progress tracker and corroborate that with the sprints that are associated with the star map on the UI team. You're like, oh, okay, the base function is there. They've got the base tech in. They're adding more functionality to it and making it pretty and usable and all that. And it's at this point on this sprint or whatever. You can use that along with the things that we've been talking about for the past hour in order to help set your expectations.
There's one more thing I'd like to add to our resource list, and that would be
go for it.
People and content creators. Kind of a self-plug, but not just one, not just us. Like Salty Mike does them, Astropub does them, Super Mac Brothers does them. There's a ton of
Super
good.
Mac Brother does episodes based off of the Shiny Tracker updates.
There's a ton of good creators that are there trying to extrapolate the same information that everyone else is. So watching all these other points of view on it will give you and me a much clearer picture of what is actually in front of us. Not just one person's, well, that thing says that. Well, if you go and somebody else says this thing means something else, and you go to a third one and they agree with one of the two, it's probably the one that has two people on it. But the more information you have, the better that you can extrapolate and actually get firm information on it instead of just one person saying one thing. And that, again, is what we wanted to do with this segment, was give everyone, all of you, the ability to get the information yourself and to have discussions about it without needing it translate from the roadmap to normal human speak.
Yeah, I didn't, learn all this on my own. I didn't do all this on my own. I figured these things out by talking to people in different discords, by asking devs who are active in different parts of the community, and by following different content creators who have learned these things. I'm not sort of some sort of wizard who, I don't have any insider knowledge or anything like that. I've asked and I've learned and I figured this out, and so it helps me. I don't get it's not a lot of people get really upset about the pace of development, about things going on, and I don't get upset at all. I don't get upset anymore because I've been following closely and I've learned, and it helps me set my own expectations, and I'm much more woosah, about everything, and it allows for you to have much more interesting and fun and engaging conversations with other people in the community, or the parts of the community that you're involved in. That's how Nazeris and I got started with the podcast, is because we enjoy this stuff and we enjoy talking about it. And you're like, hey, dude, do you want to talk about this live on stream? Yeah, that sounds like fun. Let's do it.
Live this week is not exactly live.
Yeah. It's a live, barely. We're doing chest compressions. We're doing CPR on Twitch right now. But yeah, you're exactly right. Like, I watch every episode of Super Mac Brother, every episode of Astro Pub and all his different channels now. I watch every episode of Space Tomato, every episode of Info Runners, every episode of Morphologists. I source, along with all the other reading that I do that a lot of people don't like to do, but you can get a lot of this information in really a high quality presentation from these different people. But it's important to take it all into context, because no one is perfect. No content creator is perfect. No content creator has a complete understanding of all the things, and that's why it's important to get information from multiple sources. It's almost like doing research on your own is probably a bad idea unless you know how to do research. But
what?
Weird. But yeah, that is I think that's the end of the Spectrum Pulse. I hope that you guys find it helpful. If you have any questions, pop into Nazeris's Discord or the Info Runners or the Astropub, and hit us up. Leave a comment on YouTube, and I promise we will answer it to the best of our abilities, or reply to the best of our abilities. But I hope that this has been illuminating. And yeah, like I said, if you have questions, or you want to chat more, we'll do a live demonstration with you in order to give you a visual of what we're talking about. But this is the production value you're going to get for right now.